Talked up their relationship for the last 2 seasons about how it feeds their chemistry.
Stop everything you're doing right now, because what I'm about to tell you could change the entire future of the Indiana Fever. And honestly, it might already be too late. See, while everyone's celebrating Caitlin Clark's rookie explosion, while the jerseys are flying off shelves and the arena selling out for the first time in years, something dark is happening behind closed doors. Something the Fever front office doesn't want you to know. Sophie Cunningham, the enforcer, the protector, the woman who had Caitlin's back when nobody else would, might be gone. Not traded, not resting, gone. And here's the part that should make every Fever fan sick to their stomach. It didn't have to happen this way. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't circumstances beyond anyone's control. This was a choice. A calculated gamble that's now blowing up in Indiana's face at the absolute worst possible moment. Let me paint you a picture. Right now, the WNBA is stuck, frozen. The entire league is holding its breath because of one thing: the CBA negotiations. CBA, collective bargaining agreement, is basically the rulebook that determines everything: salaries, schedules, player movement, free agency. And until a new deal gets signed, nothing moves. No contracts, no signings, no trades finalized. Teams are watching their rosters slip through their fingers like sand. But here's where it gets ugly for Indiana. Other teams? They prepared for this. They locked in their pieces early. They made their moves before the freeze hit. The Fever? They waited. They trusted loyalty would hold everything together. They bet on players sticking around because of vibes and team chemistry. And now they're watching that bet collapse in real time. Think about what the Fever built last season. Caitlin Clark wasn't just playing basketball. She was surviving a war. Every game, teams came at her harder. Physical, brutal, testing if the rookie could handle the heat. And who stepped up? Sophie Cunningham. The woman became a walking shield. She set screens that made defenders think twice. She brought an edge that said, "You touch our star, we're touching you back." Fever fans didn't just love Sophie. They needed Sophie. She was the balance, the grit, the attitude that made Indiana dangerous instead of just talented. But loyalty in sports? It's a beautiful concept and a terrible strategy. Because while the Fever were banking on relationships, other leagues were making calls, big money calls. And players, even loyal ones, have bills to pay and futures to protect. The WNBA isn't the only option anymore. Project B, overseas deals unrivaled. There are doors opening everywhere. And those doors? They don't wait for CBA negotiations to finish. They don't care about Indiana's timeline. They want decisions now. So here's the question that's keeping Fever executives up at night. What happens when a player you were counting on already signed somewhere else? What happens when your backup plan never existed? What happens when the franchise that was supposed to dominate the next decade suddenly looks like it might crumble before it ever really started? The answer is coming. And trust me, it's worse than you think. But the Sophie situation? That's just the surface. Because there's another name on this roster that's about to become a massive problem. A name that might force Indiana to choose between their present and their future. And I promise you, nobody is ready for what that choice actually looks like. Kelsey Mitchell. Remember that name. Write it down. Because she might be the reason the Indiana Fever's dream season turns into a nightmare before it even starts. And the craziest part? It's not her fault. Let me explain something that most casual fans don't fully understand. Kelsey Mitchell isn't just a good player on the Fever roster. She's the engine. Before Caitlin Clark ever stepped foot in Indiana, Kelsey was the one carrying this franchise on her back. Year after year. Losing season after losing season. She showed up. She scored. She fought. When the arena was empty and nobody cared about women's basketball in Indianapolis, Kelsey Mitchell cared. She's a 3-time All-Star, a walking bucket, a player who can create her own shot when the play breaks down and the clock is dying. And more importantly, she's the perfect complement to Caitlin Clark. Think about it. Caitlin draws every defense's attention. She's the supernova that pulls all the gravity toward her. But what happens when teams double her? When they trap her? When they throw bodies at her to disrupt the flow? You need someone who can punish that attention. You need a secondary scorer who can step up and kill teams when they overcommit. That's Kelsey Mitchell. So here's the problem. Right now, as we speak, Kelsey Mitchell is not under contract with the Indiana Fever. Let that sink in for a second. The second best player on a team that was this close to making real noise last year is technically a free agent. But it gets worse. Because Kelsey Mitchell is under contract somewhere. Just not with the WNBA. She signed with Project B. Now, if you're wondering, what the heck is Project B? You're not alone. Project B is a new professional women's basketball league that launched with serious money and serious ambitions. We're talking about wealthy investors, primetime scheduling, and contracts that rival, sometimes exceed, what WNBA players make. It's not unrivaled. It's not overseas. It's a whole different animal. And they made Kelsey Mitchell an offer she couldn't refuse. Can you blame her? The WNBA's CBA negotiations are dragging. Nobody knows when free agency opens. Nobody knows what the salary cap looks like. Nobody knows if teams can even make offers yet. Meanwhile, Project B said, here's guaranteed money. Here's your spot. Sign now. So she signed. And that decision just created a scheduling disaster that could tear the Fever apart. Here's the math that doesn't work. The WNBA is proposing a new 54-game schedule in the upcoming CBA. That's 10 more games than last season. More games means a longer season. A longer season means earlier start dates. We're talking training camp potentially starting in mid-March. Mid-March. Let that sink in. Project B has games scheduled during that exact window. Kelsey Mitchell has contractual obligations to Project B. The Fever need Kelsey Mitchell for training camp, preseason preparation, and building chemistry with Caitlin Clark. But she might not be there. She might be across the country playing for another league. And the WNBA? They don't negotiate around other leagues. They don't wait. They expect you to show up. So what happens when Kelsey can't show up? What happens when Indiana's second star is missing for the first 3 weeks of camp? What happens when Caitlin Clark is trying to build rhythm with a backcourt partner who isn't there? This isn't just a scheduling inconvenience. This is a chemistry killer. Basketball isn't just about talent. It's about timing. It's about knowing where your teammate is going to be without looking. It's about trust built through thousands of repetitions. You can't build that trust if one player is missing. And you definitely can't build it during a shortened, chaotic preseason window where everyone's scrambling. But wait, there's a bigger question nobody's asking. If Kelsey Mitchell has to choose between Project B money and WNBA loyalty, what makes anyone think she'll choose Indiana? What makes anyone think she'll walk away from guaranteed money for a team that didn't lock her up when they had the chance? And here's the scary part. She's not the only one facing that choice. Other Fever players are looking at the same situation. Other rosters across the WNBA are crumbling under the same pressure. But Indiana? Indiana has the most to lose. Because Indiana has Caitlin Clark. And building around a generational talent requires one thing above all else. A supporting cast that actually shows up. So far, the Fever's supporting cast is vanishing. And the front office? Silent. Not a word. Not a statement. Not a single reassurance. Just silence. And in this league, silence doesn't mean everything's fine. Silence means something's broken. You want to know what's scarier than losing a player? Losing a player and having no plan to replace them. That's where the Indiana Fever are right now. And the silence from the front office? Is not a strategy. I panic. Let's talk about that silence for a second. Because in professional sports, silence is never neutral. Silence is a message. When a front office goes quiet during a crisis, it means one of two things. Either they're working on something so big they can't risk leaking it, or they have absolutely nothing. No backup plan. No contingency. No answers. And based on everything we're seeing right now, it's looking like door number 2. Fever fans aren't stupid. They've watched this franchise struggle for years. They've sat through losing seasons, empty promises, and rebuilding plans that never materialized. And then, finally, something magical happened. Caitlin Clark arrived. Suddenly, the arena was packed. National TV games were scheduled. Merchandise was selling out. The franchise that everyone ignored was suddenly the hottest ticket in women's basketball. Hope returned. Real, tangible, electric hope. And now fans are watching that hope get threatened by decisions that make zero sense. Go on social media right now. Look at what Fever fans are saying. They're not just disappointed. They're angry. How do you let Sophie Cunningham slip away? Why isn't Kelsey Mitchell locked up already? What is this front office doing? And the hardest question of all, are we about to waste Caitlin Clark? That question hurts because it's valid. Generational talents don't come around often. When they do, you have a window. A small, precious window to build around them, to surround them with the right pieces, to create something special before circumstances change. The Fever's window is open right now. Wide open. But instead of jumping through it, they're standing frozen at the edge. Here's what I think is really happening. The Fever front office got comfortable. They looked at the Caitlin Clark hype, saw the jersey sales, watched the attendance numbers explode, and thought, we've made it. The hard part's over. But they forgot the most important rule in professional sports. Hype doesn't win championships. Rosters do. You can have the most popular player in the league. You can sell out every home game. You can dominate social media and break viewership records. But if your roster falls apart, if your supporting cast disappears, if your best players sign with other leagues because you didn't move fast enough, none of that hype matters. You're just a famous losing team. And that's the nightmare scenario that's unfolding right now. Sophie Cunningham, the heart and soul of Indiana's toughness, might be gone. Kelsey Mitchell, the scoring punch they desperately need, is contractually obligated elsewhere. The CBA negotiations are dragging with no end in sight. Training camp dates are shifting earlier, creating conflicts nobody prepared for. And the front office? Crickets. Now some people might say, relax. It's just the off-season. Things will work out. And yeah, maybe. Maybe everything falls into place perfectly. Maybe the CBA gets resolved tomorrow. Maybe Kelsey finds a way out of her Project B obligations. Maybe Sophie decides loyalty matters more than money. Maybe. But here's the thing about maybe in professional sports. Maybe doesn't build dynasties. Maybe doesn't win titles. Maybe is what franchises say right before they collapse. The great organizations, the ones that sustain success year after year, they don't rely on maybe. They plan. They prepare. They anticipate problems before they happen. They make the hard decisions early so they never get stuck in situations like this. Want to know what happens when a franchise wastes a generational talent? Look at history. The Detroit Lions had Barry Sanders, one of the greatest running backs ever to play football. They surrounded him with mediocrity and watched him retire early out of frustration. The Cleveland Cavaliers had LeBron James the first time around. They failed to build a proper supporting cast. He left. The franchise became a laughingstock. The Seattle Mariners had Ken Griffey Jr., one of baseball's most electrifying players. They couldn't keep the right pieces around him. He left too. Over and over again, the pattern repeats. Superstar arrives. Organization gets comfortable. Supporting cast crumbles. Superstar leaves or fades. Franchise spends decades recovering. Is that where Indiana is heading? Right now, Caitlin Clark is locked in. She's committed. She believes in this franchise and wants to build something special. But belief has limits. Patience has limits. And loyalty, as the Fever are learning the hard way, isn't guaranteed. If Indiana keeps fumbling the pieces around her, if they keep losing key players to other leagues, if they keep going silent when fans need answers, how long before Caitlin starts asking questions too? How long before she looks around the locker room and realizes the cavalry isn't coming? How long before she decides maybe Indiana isn't the place to build her legacy after all? That moment might be closer than anyone thinks. And what happens next could determine the fate of this franchise for the next decade. What if I told you the Indiana Fever saw this coming? What if I told you they had months to prepare for this exact situation? And what if I told you they did nothing? That's not speculation. That's the reality we're living in right now. Let's rewind the clock. The WNBA's CBA negotiations didn't start yesterday. They've been brewing for months. Everyone in the league knew this was coming. Team executives knew. Agents knew. Players knew. The signs were everywhere. Back in the summer, reports started surfacing about potential schedule changes. Whispers about earlier start dates. Rumors about extended seasons. Smart front offices started planning immediately. They began having conversations with their key players. They started exploring contingencies. They mapped out scenarios for every possible outcome. But Indiana? Indiana was too busy celebrating. And look, I get it. After years of irrelevance, after being the laughingstock of the WNBA, the Fever finally had something to celebrate. Caitlin Clark's arrival changed everything overnight. Suddenly, the national media cared about Indianapolis. Suddenly, celebrities were courtside. Suddenly, the future looked impossibly bright. Who wants to think about CBA logistics when you're riding that kind of wave? Who wants to stress about scheduling conflicts when every game feels like a party? But that's exactly when smart organizations dig in. That's exactly when championship caliber front offices do their best work. Because they know the truth. The wave always crashes eventually. And if you're not ready for the impact, it'll drown you. Here's what we know for certain. Project B launched with aggressive recruiting. They targeted WNBA players specifically. They knew the CBA uncertainty created a window of opportunity. And they pounced. Multiple reports confirmed that Kelsey Mitchell was approached early. The offer was significant. The terms were favorable. The timeline was clear. Did the Fever front office know this was happening? Of course they did. In professional sports, nothing stays secret. Agents talk. Players talk. League insiders talk. Information flows constantly. So the question isn't whether Indiana knew Project B was coming for their players. The question is, why didn't they act? Maybe they thought Kelsey wouldn't leave. After all, she's been loyal for years. She's played through losing seasons. She's shown commitment when nobody was watching. Surely that loyalty would hold, right? Wrong. Loyalty doesn't pay bills. Loyalty doesn't secure your family's future. Loyalty doesn't guarantee you a roster spot when you're 30 and the league is getting younger every year. Players understand this better than anyone. They've seen too many teammates get cut, traded, or forgotten the moment their value dips. So when guaranteed money shows up, real, tangible, contractually obligated money, loyalty takes a backseat. Every single time. And here's what makes this even more painful. Kelsey Mitchell wanted to stay. Multiple sources close to the situation have suggested she was hoping Indiana would make a move. She was waiting for a sign that the franchise valued her. She was looking for any indication that she was part of the long-term plan. But that sign never came. The call never happened. The reassurance never materialized. So she did what any smart professional would do. She protected herself. Now, some people might argue, well, the CBA freeze prevented Indiana from making an official offer. And technically, that's true. But here's what that argument ignores. You don't need an official contract to show commitment. You can have private conversations. You can make verbal assurances. You can signal, through actions, through communication, through simple human connection, that someone matters to you. Did Indiana do any of that? Based on the evidence, it doesn't look like it. And that failure, that lack of basic communication, might end up costing them everything. Because here's what happens when you let a key player slip away. It sends a message, not just to that player, not just to fans, to everyone watching. Other players on the roster see how you handled Kelsey's situation. They see the silence. They see the lack of urgency. They see a front office that doesn't prioritize retention. And they start asking themselves, am I next? Will they fight for me when it matters? Can I trust this organization with my career? Think about who else is on this Fever roster right now. Aaliyah Boston, the reigning Rookie of the Year before Caitlin. A dominant force with championship potential. She's watching all of this unfold. Lexi Hull, a sharpshooter with range for days. She's watching too. Nalissa Smith, a powerful forward with untapped potential. Same story. Every single player is paying attention. And if Indiana's handling of Kelsey Mitchell and Sophie Cunningham is any indication of how this franchise operates, why would any of them feel secure? But there's something else happening that nobody's talking about yet. Something that makes this entire situation 10 times more complicated. Because the CBA negotiations aren't just about scheduling. They're about money. Specifically, they're about how much WNBA players can actually earn. And what's being proposed right now? It might force the Fever to make an impossible choice. A choice between keeping their stars happy and keeping their franchise financially viable. And trust me, when money enters the equation, everything changes. What Indiana decides next could determine whether this team becomes a dynasty or a cautionary tale. Let me tell you something about professional sports that nobody likes to admit. It's not about heart. It's not about passion. It's not even about winning. It's about money. And right now, the money situation in the WNBA is about to explode. The new CBA negotiations aren't just arguing about game schedules. They're fighting over the biggest financial overhaul in WNBA history. We're talking about massive salary increases, revenue sharing changes, expanded roster allowances, marketing rights, endorsement structures. Everything is on the table. And while that sounds great for players, which it absolutely is, it creates a nightmare for team budgets, especially for franchises like Indiana. Here's the dirty truth nobody wants to discuss. The Indiana Fever aren't the Los Angeles Lakers. They're not the New York Liberty with deep pocket ownership and premium market advantages. They're a small market franchise that's been bleeding money for years. Yes, Caitlin Clark brought unprecedented attention. Yes, ticket sales skyrocketed. Yes, merchandise revenue exploded. But building sustainable financial infrastructure takes time. You don't go from struggling franchise to wealthy powerhouse in one season. The foundation isn't there yet. So when the new CBA drops with significantly higher salary requirements, When players across the league start demanding what they're worth. When the market rate for a player like Kelsey Mitchell suddenly doubles or triples, Indiana might not be able to keep up. Think about what this means practically. Right now, the Fever have Caitlin Clark on a rookie contract. That's relatively affordable. That's manageable. But what about everyone else? Kelsey Mitchell is going to demand real money. She's earned it. She deserves it. Aaliyah Boston is going to want a significant extension soon. She's a star. She knows her value. Sophie Cunningham, if they can even keep her, isn't going to take a discount out of loyalty. Not anymore. Add it all up. Do the math. The numbers don't work. And this is where the Fever face their impossible decision. They can't afford everyone. Somebody has to go. Maybe multiple somebodies. So who do you cut? Do you sacrifice your defensive identity by letting Sophie walk? Do you gamble on finding another secondary scorer if Kelsey leaves? Do you trade young pieces for cap flexibility? Every option has consequences. Every decision weakens the team in some way. And every move gets scrutinized under the brightest spotlight in women's basketball history. Because here's what makes Indiana's situation uniquely impossible. They're not just building a team. They're building a team around the most watched player in WNBA history. Every single decision gets amplified. Every roster move gets debated on national television. Every perceived mistake gets dissected by millions of fans, analysts, and critics. There's no room for error. There's no grace period. There's no quiet rebuilding phase where you can figure things out away from the spotlight. Indiana is building the plane while flying it at 30,000 feet with the whole world watching through the windows. Let's look at how other franchises have handled similar situations. The Las Vegas Aces, the current Dynasty, built their core methodically over years. They made calculated moves. They developed a culture. They invested in coaching and infrastructure. By the time Aya Wilson hit her prime, everything was in place. The Minnesota Lynx dynasty was the same story. Maya Moore didn't win 4 championships by accident. The organization built around her greatness. These franchises understood the assignment. They knew that having a superstar is only step 1. Steps 2 through infinity involve supporting that superstar with everything she needs to succeed. Indiana seems to have stopped at step 1. They got Caitlin. They celebrated. They sold jerseys. But where's the infrastructure? Where's the long-term roster planning? Where's the financial strategy to retain key players through the CBA changes? I keep looking for evidence of a master plan. I keep waiting for the front office to reveal some brilliant strategy they've been secretly executing. And I keep coming up empty. You know what's heartbreaking? The fans. Fever fans waited years for this moment. They sat through season after season of irrelevance. They stayed loyal when attendance was embarrassing. They believed when there was no logical reason to believe. And now, finally, their faith paid off. Caitlin Clark arrived and everything changed. This was supposed to be the beginning of something beautiful. This was supposed to be the reward for all those years of patience. Instead, they're watching their franchise fumble the greatest opportunity in organizational history. They're watching key players slip away. They're watching a front office paralyzed by indecision. They're watching their dreams threatened by incompetence. But here's what I haven't told you yet. There's one move Indiana could make that would change everything. One decision that would signal to the entire league, to fans, to players, to critics, that this franchise is serious about winning. It's risky. It's expensive. It would require incredible courage from ownership. But if they pull it off, it would completely flip the narrative. It would turn Indiana from a cautionary tale into a blueprint for success. The question is, does this front office have the guts to do it? Based on what we've seen so far, I have serious doubts. But if they're listening, and they should be, let me explain exactly what needs to happen. Okay, let's talk about how Indiana can fix this. Because despite everything I've said, despite all the criticism, all the frustration, all the missed opportunities, there's still a path forward. It's narrow. It's difficult. It requires immediate action. But it exists. And if the Fever front office is smart enough to take it, everything changes. Here's what Indiana needs to do. Right now. Today. Before the CBA dust settles. They need to go all in. Not halfway. Not cautiously. Not with one eye on the budget and one eye on winning. Full commitment. Maximum aggression. Championship or bust mentality. That means spending money they're uncomfortable spending. That means making promises they're scared to make. That means treating this Caitlin Clark window like the once-in-a-generation opportunity it actually is. Let me break it down step by step. Step 1, Kelsey Mitchell. The moment, the second, The CBA freeze lifts. Indiana needs to have a max offer ready. Not a competitive offer. Not a let's see what the market looks like offer. A max offer. With guarantees. With security. With everything. Kelsey needs to feel valued. Yes, it's expensive. Yes, it might stretch the budget. Yes, it limits flexibility elsewhere. But losing Kelsey isn't an option. She's the bridge between the old Fever and the new Fever. She's the proof that loyalty can actually be rewarded in this organization. She's the running mate Caitlin Clark needs to thrive. You don't let that walk for a few $1 million. Step 2. Sophie Cunningham. This one's trickier because Sophie might already be halfway out the door. But even if she's committed elsewhere, Indiana needs to exhaust every possibility. Can they offer more money? Offer it. Can they promise a bigger role? Promise it. Can they appeal to the relationship she built with Caitlin? Use it. Pride has no place here. If keeping Sophie requires the front office to grovel, then grovel. If it requires ownership to personally make phone calls, then make the calls. Do whatever it takes. Because Sophie Cunningham isn't just a player. She's an identity. She represents the toughness Indiana desperately needs. She's the enforcer who protects your franchise player. She's the teammate who makes everyone around her better. You don't replace that easily. You fight like hell to keep it. Step 3. Address the Project B conflict head-on. Stop pretending it doesn't exist. Stop hoping it magically resolves itself. Sit down with Kelsey. Sit down with any other player facing scheduling conflicts. Have honest, transparent conversations about expectations. Can Project B obligations be restructured? Can appearances be minimized during WNBA season? Can compromises be reached that satisfy both commitments? Maybe. Maybe not. But you don't know until you try. And right now, Indiana isn't even trying. They're hiding. They're hoping. They're waiting for someone else to solve their problems. That doesn't work in professional sports. Step 4. Communicate. This might be the most important step of all. End the silence. Immediately. Put out a statement. Hold a press conference. Do an interview. Tweet something. Anything. Let fans know you understand their concerns. Let players know you're fighting for them. Let the league know Indiana isn't going to roll over and accept mediocrity. Silence breeds anxiety. Silence feeds rumors. Silence makes everyone assume the worst. Communication, even imperfect communication, builds trust. And trust is what the Fever desperately need right now. But beyond these immediate actions, Indiana needs a philosophical shift. They need to stop operating like a small market franchise grateful for any success. They need to start operating like a championship organization that expects success. There's a difference. Small market mentality says, let's be careful with money. Championship mentality says, let's invest in winning. Small market mentality says, we can't afford mistakes. Championship mentality says, we can't afford inaction. Small market mentality says, let's wait and see. Championship mentality says, let's move now and adjust later. Of course, this all comes down to ownership. Are the people who own the Indiana Fever willing to invest at championship levels? Are they willing to spend money today that might not pay off for years? Are they willing to treat Caitlin Clark's window as the organizational priority it should be? Because here's the reality. Players can only do so much. Coaches can only scheme so much. Front offices can only plan so much. At the end of the day, ownership sets the ceiling. If ownership is cheap, the franchise will be cheap. If ownership is scared, the franchise will be scared. If ownership lacks vision, the franchise will wander aimlessly. I want to believe Indiana's ownership understands this. I want to believe they see what they have in Caitlin Clark. I want to believe they recognize that moments like this, true franchise-altering moments, don't come around twice. But wanting to believe isn't enough. Fever fans have been burned before. They've watched ownership make penny-pinching decisions that cost the team talent. They've watched short-term thinking sabotage long-term success. They've watched mediocrity get accepted as inevitable. So here's the ultimate question. Has anything actually changed? Or is Indiana's front office going to repeat the same patterns that kept this franchise irrelevant for a decade? Because the next few weeks will tell us everything. The CBA will eventually get resolved. The freeze will lift. Decisions will have to be made. And when that moment comes, Indiana will either prove they're ready for the big stage, or they'll prove that some franchises are simply destined to waste greatness. The clock is ticking. And what happens next might determine whether Caitlin Clark spends her prime in Indiana or somewhere else entirely. Let's go somewhere uncomfortable. Let's talk about the scenario nobody wants to imagine. What if Indiana doesn't fix this? What if the front office stays silent? What if the key players leave? What if everything falls apart? I need you to see what that future looks like, because it's closer than you think. Imagine it's October 2025. The WNBA season just ended. Indiana finished .500, maybe slightly below. Caitlin Clark averaged incredible numbers, 30 points, 8 assists, highlight plays every night. But the wins didn't come. Sophie Cunningham is playing for another franchise. She's thriving. She's beloved by her new fan base. Every time she plays Indiana, the camera cuts to her old teammates, and the announcers mention what could have been. Kelsey Mitchell is overseas, or playing in Project B full-time. She gave up on waiting for Indiana to value her. She's making more money with less stress, and honestly, she looks happier. The Fever roster is filled with replacements, decent players, role players, nobody who moves the needle. And Caitlin? Caitlin is exhausted. She's carrying every possession. Every defensive scheme is designed to stop her specifically. Teams are sending double and triple teams because nobody else on Indiana can punish the attention. She's getting fouled hard, taking physical punishment, fighting through contact that doesn't get called. And there's nobody to protect her. Nobody setting screens that make defenders think twice. Nobody stepping up with an enforcer mentality. Sophie's gone, remember? So Caitlin just takes it, night after night, city after city. Her body wears down. Her spirit dims. The joy that made her special, that unrelenting competitive fire that captivated millions, starts flickering. And you know what happens next? The media turns. The same analysts who celebrated her arrival start asking different questions. Is Caitlin Clark overrated? Can she actually win at this level? Was the hype bigger than the reality? They won't blame the front office. They won't mention the roster failures. They won't acknowledge the supporting cast that abandoned ship. They'll blame her. Because that's how sports media works. The star gets the glory when things go right, and the star gets the blame when things go wrong. Fair or not, that's the reality. And here's the part that really scares me. What happens to Caitlin's confidence? She's human. She reads the headlines. She sees the criticism. She hears the whispers. At some point, even the most mentally strong athlete starts wondering, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I can't do this alone. Maybe I chose the wrong franchise. That internal doubt is poison. It seeps into your game slowly. It affects your decision making. It makes you hesitate when you should attack. And once it takes root, it's incredibly hard to remove. We've seen this story before. Remember Tracy McGrady? One of the most talented scorers in NBA history. Unguardable in his prime. Could do things with a basketball that defied physics. But he spent his best years on teams that couldn't support him. Orlando couldn't build around him properly. Houston's championship window closed due to injuries and roster issues. By the time he finally landed in a good situation, his body was broken. He never won a title. All that talent, all that greatness, wasted. Or look at Chris Paul, arguably the greatest pure point guard of his generation. Elite at everything, a walking basketball IQ. But for years he was stuck on rosters that couldn't get over the hump. Now he's in the twilight of his career, still chasing that elusive championship. The window is almost closed. Indiana is walking the exact same path right now. They have generational talent. They have a player who could define an entire era of women's basketball. And they're surrounding her with uncertainty, chaos, and mismanagement. How does this story end differently? Why should we believe Indiana will be the exception? Because they care about Caitlin? So did Orlando care about T-Mac? Because they have good intentions? So did every franchise that wasted a superstar. Good intentions don't win championships. Good rosters do. And let's talk about something else. The fans. Right now, Fever fans are frustrated but loyal. They're giving the front office the benefit of the doubt. They're hoping things will turn around. But patience has limits. If Indiana keeps fumbling, if the roster keeps getting worse, if the losses keep piling up, what happens to that loyalty? It erodes. Slowly at first, then all at once. The sellout crowds become half-empty arenas. The passionate fan base becomes casual observers. The merchandise collecting dust. The excitement fading into apathy. Indiana goes back to being irrelevant. Except this time it's worse. Because this time, everyone remembers what could have been. And Caitlin? She'll request a trade. I know nobody wants to hear that. I know it feels impossible right now. But elite athletes don't stay in bad situations forever. LeBron left Cleveland twice. Kevin Durant left Oklahoma City. Anthony Davis forced his way out of New Orleans. When superstars realize their organizations won't step up, they step out. And why shouldn't they? Why should Caitlin Clark sacrifice her prime years for a franchise that refuses to build around her? Why should she stay loyal to an organization that didn't show loyalty to Sophie or Kelsey? The scary part? This nightmare scenario isn't some distant future. It could begin unfolding this season. If the CBA negotiations drag on too long, if Indiana loses key players before the season starts, if chemistry never develops and the wins don't come, the spiral begins immediately. And once it starts, stopping it becomes nearly impossible. The Fever are standing at the edge of a cliff right now. One wrong step and they fall. One right step and they soar. What happens next isn't about destiny. It's about decisions. And those decisions need to happen now. Not next month. Not next season. No. Is anybody in that front office listening? Okay. We've explored the nightmare. Now let's explore the dream. Because it's still possible. Indiana can still get this right. And if they do, what happens next will be legendary. Picture this. It's May 2026. The Indiana Fever are the hottest team in the WNBA. Not because of hype. Not because of social media buzz. Because they're winning. Dominating, actually. Caitlin Clark is playing the best basketball of her life. She's averaging a triple-double. She's making passes that shouldn't be physically possible. She's hitting shots from distances that make defenders question their existence. But here's the difference from our nightmare scenario. She's not doing it alone. Kelsey Mitchell is right there beside her. The Fever locked her up with a max extension the moment the CBA freeze lifted. They showed her the respect she earned through years of loyalty. They proved that Indiana rewards commitment. And Kelsey responded. She's averaging 22 points per game. She's punishing every team that doubles Caitlin. She's playing with joy because she knows her organization believes in her. Sophie Cunningham? Still in Indiana. The front office fought like hell to keep her. They made calls. They made promises. They made it impossible for her to say no. And Sophie's doing what Sophie does best. Setting bone-rattling screens. Getting in opponents' heads. Protecting Caitlin with a ferocity that makes other teams think twice about playing dirty. Every time someone tries to cheap shot the franchise player, Sophie's right there. Not today. Not ever. But it's not just about individual performances. It's about chemistry. The Fever play like they've been together for a decade. They know each other's tendencies instinctively. They anticipate passes before they're thrown. They cover for each other defensively without communication. Training camp started on time because Indiana resolved the Project B conflicts through honest conversations and creative scheduling. They built rapport during preseason. They developed rhythm through practice. They became a team instead of a collection of talented individuals. And the coaching staff? Finally operating at a championship level. They've designed schemes that maximize Caitlin's vision while hiding defensive weaknesses. They've created sets that get Kelsey open looks in crucial moments. They've built a defensive identity around effort, communication, and Sophie's intimidation factor. Every timeout is productive. Every adjustment is precise. Every game plan is executed with confidence. Fever fans? They're experiencing something they never thought possible. Gainbridge Fieldhouse is sold out every single game. Not just for Caitlin's celebrity, for the team's dominance. The atmosphere is electric. Fans are chanting, stomping, screaming. Opposing teams dread coming to Indianapolis because they know the crowd will be deafening. National TV games aren't curiosity anymore. They're appointment viewing. Everyone wants to see what Indiana does next. And the media? The same analysts who questioned Indiana's future are now writing love letters. The Fever figured it out. This is how you build around a superstar. Indiana might be the next dynasty. The narrative completely flipped. Because winning changes everything. When you're winning, past mistakes become learning experiences. When you're winning, tough decisions become bold moves. When you're winning, patient fans become loyal believers. Victory rewrites history. Fast forward to the playoffs. Indiana enters as the #1 seed. They sweep the first round. It's not even competitive. The second round is tougher, but Caitlin rises to the moment. She hits a game winner in Game 3 that sends Gainbridge Fieldhouse into absolute chaos. The conference finals go to 7 games. It's brutal, physical, exhausting. But in Game 7, with everything on the line, Kelsey Mitchell takes over. She scores 15 points in the fourth quarter. Indiana advances. The franchise is going to the WNBA Finals for the first time in years. The championship series is legendary. Two titans clashing. Every game is decided by single digits. The nation watches. Ratings shatter records. And in Game 5, with the series tied 2-2, Caitlin Clark delivers the performance of her life. 41 points, 12 assists, 8 rebounds. She's everywhere. Every big shot, every crucial pass, every defensive stop that matters. When the final buzzer sounds, Indiana wins by 6. Caitlin Clark is your WNBA Finals MVP. The Indiana Fever are world champions. The confetti falls. Caitlin is crying. Sophie is screaming. Kelsey is hugging everyone in sight. The trophy gets hoisted. Fever fans around the world are sobbing with joy. Years of frustration, decades of irrelevance, washed away in one beautiful moment. Social media explodes. Indiana did it. Caitlin Clark is a champion. The Fever dynasty is here. And somewhere in that celebration, a simple truth echoes. This is what happens when a franchise commits to greatness. That championship becomes the foundation. Indiana doesn't win just once. They win again and again. The Fever become the gold standard, the model franchise, the organization everyone else tries to copy. Caitlin Clark spends her entire career in Indiana. She retires as the greatest player in WNBA history. Her jersey hangs in the rafters. A statue stands outside the arena. Kids grow up dreaming of wearing Fever colors because that's what champions wear. Beautiful, right? That's the dream. That's what's possible if Indiana makes the right choices. But here's the thing about dreams. They don't happen automatically. They require sacrifice. They require courage. They require someone to step up and demand that the dream becomes reality. Right now, Indiana is standing at a crossroads. One path leads to the nightmare. One path leads to the dream. The path they choose depends entirely on what happens in the next few weeks. And the decisions being made right now, behind closed doors, away from cameras, will determine which future Indiana gets. So the question becomes, who's making those decisions? And do they have the guts to choose greatness? Because if they don't, everything I just described evaporates, and Indiana goes back to being a franchise that almost mattered. Let's talk about the people behind the curtain. The names you don't see on jerseys. The faces that don't appear on highlight reels. The decision makers who will ultimately determine whether Indiana rises or falls. Because right now, everything depends on them. And honestly, that's terrifying. Every NBA and WNBA franchise has a power structure. Ownership at the top, general manager below them, coaches and staff underneath. Decisions flow downward. Accountability flows upward. When things go right, everyone shares credit. When things go wrong, someone takes the fall. But here's the problem with Indiana's current structure. Nobody seems to be taking responsibility for anything. The CBA delays? Out of our control. Kelsey Mitchell's situation? Complicated circumstances. Sophie Cunningham's potential departure? We're monitoring developments. Monitoring developments. That's not a strategy. That's an excuse. Let's start with ownership. The Indiana Fever are owned by the Pacers Sports and Entertainment Group, the same organization that runs the Indiana Pacers. On paper, this should be advantageous. Shared resources, shared infrastructure, shared expertise from running a successful NBA franchise. But here's the question nobody's asking. Is women's basketball actually a priority for this ownership group? Or is the Fever just a side project? A nice to have rather than a must win? Because the way resources get allocated tells you everything about organizational priorities. And right now, the Fever's resource allocation looks concerning. Look at the front office staffing. Compare Indiana's basketball operations department to championship caliber organizations like Las Vegas or New York. The Aces have a robust scouting department, multiple assistant GMs, dedicated cap specialists, player development coaches for every position. The Liberty invested heavily in analytics, advanced medical staff, mental performance coaches. What does Indiana have? A skeleton crew. A front office that's been operating on a shoestring budget while the Pacers get premium resources across the hall. Is that changing now that Caitlin Clark arrived? Maybe. But maybe isn't good enough. Let's talk about the general manager. This is the person responsible for roster construction, contract negotiations, draft strategy, trade execution. This is the person who should have anticipated the CBA conflicts. This is the person who should have locked up key players before the freeze. This is the person whose job is literally to prevent situations like the one Indiana finds itself in right now. So where are they? Why haven't we heard a single public statement addressing fan concerns? Why hasn't there been any communication about the plan moving forward? Why is the silence so deafening? I can think of 3 possible explanations. Explanation 1. The GM is working furiously behind the scenes on solutions we don't know about yet. Maybe there are negotiations happening privately. Maybe deals are being structured that can't be announced until the CBA resolves. Maybe everything is fine and we're all panicking for nothing. Possible, but unlikely. If positive developments were happening, you'd leak something to calm the fan base. Explanation 2. The GM is paralyzed by uncertainty. The CBA situation is genuinely unprecedented. Maybe they don't know what moves to make because the rules keep changing. Maybe they're waiting for clarity before committing to any direction. Understandable, but unacceptable. Great executives make decisions with incomplete information. That's literally the job. Explanation 3. The GM is in over their head. Maybe the Caitlin Clark situation elevated expectations beyond what this front office can handle. Maybe they were fine managing a rebuilding franchise but can't operate at championship levels. Harsh, but possibly accurate. And what about coaching? Christie Sides led Indiana to their best season in years. She deserves credit for maximizing the roster she had. But playoff caliber coaching and championship caliber coaching are different things. Can she make adjustments on the fly against elite competition? Can she manage egos as the roster gains more stars? Can she handle the pressure of national scrutiny every single game? We don't know yet. And that uncertainty adds another layer of risk to Indiana's situation. Here's something people forget. Players talk to each other. Across teams. Across leagues. Constantly. They share information about front offices. They warn each other about bad organizations. They recommend good situations. If Indiana's front office is as dysfunctional as it appears, every player in the WNBA already knows. Which means free agents will think twice before signing with the Fever. Which means trade targets will resist being dealt to Indianapolis. Which means Indiana's reputation becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Bad organizations struggle to attract talent. Struggling to attract talent makes organizations worse. The cycle continues until someone breaks it. And this brings us back to Caitlin Clark. Right now, she's locked in, committed, focused on winning. But she's also watching. She's watching how the front office handles adversity. She's watching whether ownership invests properly. She's watching if her teammates get treated with respect. She's taking mental notes. And those notes will determine her long-term future. You know what conversation nobody's having publicly? What happens when Caitlin Clark's rookie contract expires? It's coming. Faster than anyone wants to admit. And when that moment arrives, Caitlin will have leverage. Massive, unprecedented, franchise-altering leverage. If Indiana hasn't proven itself by then, if the front office hasn't demonstrated competence, if ownership hasn't shown commitment, if the roster hasn't improved, why would she stay? She could go anywhere. New York, Los Angeles, Las Vegas. Any franchise would empty their entire roster to acquire her. The bidding war would be nuclear. So here's the reality Indiana's decision makers need to understand. This isn't just about the 2025 season. This isn't just about Sophie Cunningham or Kelsey Mitchell. This is about proving right now, immediately, without delay, that the Indiana Fever are a franchise worthy of Caitlin Clark's greatness. Every decision made in the next few weeks sends a message. Every action or inaction shapes the future. Every choice matters. The question isn't whether Indiana can become a championship organization. They have the star. They have the market momentum. They have the opportunity. The question is whether the people running this franchise are capable of making it happen. And based on everything we've seen so far, that question remains dangerously unanswered. The final chapter of this story is about to be written. And nobody, not the front office, not the fans, not even Caitlin herself, knows how it ends. This is it. The moment of truth. Everything we've discussed, the failures, the possibilities, the nightmares, the dreams, comes down to one fundamental reality. The Indiana Fever are standing at the most important crossroads in franchise history. And what happens next will echo for decades. Let's bring it all together. The WNBA's CBA negotiations have frozen the entire league. Teams can't sign free agents. Contracts can't be finalized. Rosters are stuck in limbo. For most franchises, this is an inconvenience. For Indiana, it's a crisis. Sophie Cunningham, the heart, the enforcer, the protector, might be gone. Pushed out by circumstances the front office should have anticipated. Kelsey Mitchell, the scoring punch, the secondary star, the perfect complement to Caitlin, is contractually obligated to Project B with no clear resolution in sight. The proposed schedule changes, 54 games, mid-March training camp, create conflicts that nobody in Indianapolis prepared for. And through all of this chaos, silence. The front office has gone quiet when fans desperately need answers. What's at stake isn't just one season. It's not just a playoff appearance. It's not just fan satisfaction. What's at stake is the entire trajectory of this franchise for the next 15 years. Get this right and Indiana becomes a dynasty. Get this wrong and Indiana becomes a cautionary tale. There is no middle ground. There is no pretty good outcome. This is binary. Win or lose. Rise or fall. Greatness or mediocrity. And at the center of everything stands Caitlin Clark, the most transformative player in women's basketball history. She didn't choose Indiana. She was drafted. But she embraced it. She committed to building something special in Indianapolis. She brought attention the franchise never had. She brought revenue the franchise never imagined. She brought hope the franchise never deserved. And now she's watching. Watching whether the organization matches her commitment. Watching whether the front office protects her supporting cast. Watching whether ownership invests at championship levels. She won't wait forever. Nobody does. To every Fever fan watching this, I see you. I understand your frustration. You've waited years, decades, for this moment. You stayed loyal when there was no reason to be loyal. You believed when belief felt foolish. And now you're being asked to trust again. Trust that the front office knows what it's doing. Trust that the silence means progress, not paralysis. Trust that everything will work out. That's a big ask, maybe too big. But here's what I want you to know. Your voice matters. Your frustration matters. Your demands for accountability matter. Organizations respond to pressure. They change when fans refuse to accept mediocrity. They improve when the cost of failure becomes too high. So don't be quiet. Don't accept excuses. Don't let the front office hide behind CBA complications and complicated circumstances. Demand answers. Demand action. Demand excellence. Because you've earned that right. To anyone in Indiana's front office watching this, the world is paying attention. Not just Fever fans. Not just WNBA observers. Everyone. Caitlin Clark made your franchise internationally relevant. Her games trend globally. Her highlights reach every corner of the planet. That visibility is a blessing and a curse. When you succeed, everyone celebrates. When you fail, everyone notices. Right now, everyone notices. They see the silence. They see the inaction. They see a franchise fumbling an unprecedented opportunity. You have a narrow window to change that narrative. Use it. Lock up Kelsey Mitchell the moment you can. Fight like hell to keep Sophie Cunningham. Resolve the scheduling conflicts through proactive communication. Invest in infrastructure that supports championship aspirations. And for God's sake, say something. Talk to your fans. Acknowledge their concerns. Share your vision. Silence isn't strength. Silence is fear. And fear doesn't build dynasties. To Indiana's ownership group, you have a choice. You can treat the Fever like a side project, a nice community asset that occasionally generates positive headlines. Or you can treat the Fever like a premier franchise, a championship organization worthy of generational investment. There is no in-between. Not anymore. Caitlin Clark eliminated the middle ground. Her arrival raised expectations to championship levels. Her presence demands championship caliber support. Her greatness requires championship quality commitment. You cannot half-ass this. You cannot hedge your bets. You cannot prioritize the Pacers while treating the Fever as an afterthought. Either commit fully, resources, staff, budget, attention, or admit that you're not serious. The fans deserve to know where you stand. Caitlin deserves to know where you stand. History will judge your decision. And here's something bigger than Indiana. What happens to the Fever matters for the entire WNBA. Caitlin Clark's arrival proved that women's basketball can capture mainstream attention. She proved that the audience exists. She proved that the market is hungry for this product. But that proof comes with responsibility. If Indiana wastes Caitlin Clark, if they fumble this opportunity, if they drive her out, if they squander the greatest talent acquisition in league history, what message does that send? It tells future stars that WNBA franchises can't be trusted. It tells potential fans that the league isn't worth investing in. It tells sponsors and media partners that women's basketball isn't ready for prime time. The damage extends far beyond Indianapolis. Indiana isn't just playing for themselves. They're playing for the future of the sport. So here we are, at the end of this journey. And I'm left with one question. The same question I've been circling throughout this entire video. The question that keeps me up at night as a fan of women's basketball. Will Indiana rise to the moment? I don't know the answer. Nobody does. The CBA negotiations will eventually conclude. The freeze will lift. Decisions will be made. Rosters will be finalized. And when the 2025 season begins, we'll see what kind of team the Fever actually are. Championship contender? Or cautionary tale? Dynasty in the making? Or opportunity wasted? The story isn't finished yet, but the next chapter is being written right now. Today, this week, this month. To everyone who watched this far, thank you. Thank you for caring about women's basketball. Thank you for demanding better from franchises that have the privilege of employing generational talent. Thank you for refusing to accept mediocrity. If you want to see how this situation unfolds, if you want analysis, updates, and honest breakdowns of everything happening with the Indiana Fever, subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification bell. Drop a comment telling me, do you think Indiana will get this right? Or are they headed for disaster? I want to hear your perspective, because this story belongs to all of us. The fans, the players, the believers. We're all invested in what happens next. And together we'll watch whether the Indiana Fever become legends or cautionary tales. The clock is ticking. The decisions are coming. And one way or another, we're about to find out what the Indiana Fever are really made of. See you in the next one.